So as I've been doing these weekly messages and interviewing different people over the weeks of this pandemic and lockdown, I have to say I've hugely appreciated the different contributions that I've had from people. We've covered a whole range of different subjects, and we're going to continue to do that over the coming weeks. And so I'm delighted that I'm joined by one of our parish priests, Vivien Elphick, who is a parish priest up in northwest Leicestershire. And she's very kindly agreed to talk with me today about her experiences in particular of conducting funeral services during this pandemic. So Vivien, thank you so much for joining me for this weekly message. And before we get into the topic, as I've been trying to do with everybody that I've interviewed, can I just ask you, first of all, how are you and how have you been coping with this experience of lockdown?
In myself, I'm fine. I'm jogging along nicely. I have to say that you can't complain when you've got a lovely house, a lovely garden, and live in a nice bit of the country. So I can't really complain. I'm fortunate. I would say I'm getting weary, and I think that's partly due to a lack of stimulation from other people, really, in the real sense, as opposed to the virtual sense. An absence of touch, because I live alone, and actually an absence of laughter. I find you don't quite have the laughter on Zoom that you do when you have a meeting. So just tiring. How have I coped? I made a rule that I wouldn't look at too much news because the speculation would take you down all sorts of roads that might never happen. So not too much news. To live where I have influence and not to worry too much about those areas where I can't affect things anyway, and to leave that to Jesus, who's more than capable.
Absolutely, and thank you for your honesty in sharing that. I can certainly say that I too have been feeling the tiredness, I think, from a whole range of different factors, and as you say, the lack of personal interaction in quite the way that we've been used to, the lack of laughter and so on. Yeah, it does have an effect over the weeks.
Mm.
So in terms of parish ministry, I'm very conscious that during this pandemic and lockdown, perhaps one of the most challenging aspects of parish ministry, certainly as I've heard speaking with a number of different clergy, has been around funerals and taking funerals in very, very different circumstances. I wonder if you can just describe for me, for those who haven't been involved in a funeral maybe during this period, but what do they actually look like? What do they feel like? And how have you gone about the task in particular of caring for people who've been bereaved?
Yeah. I mean, I still come from the place that it's a huge privilege to take funerals for people. And I think for me, the hardest bit is the pre-funeral, actually, when we're not allowed to go and see people in their homes or whatever. Some of them will Zoom with you, in which case you can pick up something more. Many of those visits are only on the phone, and so it's tough. You can't reach out and touch their hand or whatever. So that's the part I find hardest, and I feel that we're all deprived of. And it's difficult when you then turn up at the service and you haven't even seen their face before and are not allowed to shake hands with them or go near them. For me, that's the hardest bit, and I would imagine it's hard for the families as well. In terms of the services, obviously limited numbers, 10 at the crematorium here or 10 at the graveside, which does change the feeling. But our crematorium has been brilliant in that I know that for many of the funerals I've done, they're on webcast, so I've probably got a bigger congregation than I might have had otherwise, and people have been able to see the funeral live. So I've always tried to address the wider audience, if I can put it that way, not just the 10 people scattered around the chapel. Gravesides really depend on the weather. So I've just done 2 gravesides this week, thinking I'm about to get dumped on by thunderstorms, realizing that actually standing there is difficult for many of the mourners who are in the older category. On the other hand, some of these small services have been intimate and delightful. and probably the feel at them varies as much as normally. And I'm just trusting the Holy Spirit to be ministering to those people when I can't in the way that I would normally do with touch or whatever. I think he can manage that quite well. So, yeah, so I haven't found it that much difficulty. Obviously, the families do. And the particularly difficult ones is where they've died of COVID and the family haven't been able to see them either before they died or actually at the undertakers because they can't go and see the body. And those are the most difficult ones because they've missed out on that part. So it's trying to encourage photographs and things like that at that point. So I think that's mainly how it is. And then I try and follow up a day or two later with a phone call or an email or something a few weeks later, and just to keep in touch as much as the family want me to. Some do, some don't, in the same way.
Well, that's interesting, that theme of variety in it all. Every person is different, every family is different, and yeah, part of the challenge is how to tailor the service to make sure it is right for that particular family. So the government obviously now has gradually started the process of lifting restrictions, and one of the first steps in that is to say that church buildings can be open for private prayer and for funerals. But we've tried to be very clear in our diocesan statements on all this, of course, that every church is in a different place, both in the sense of its own context, but also in terms of people who are available to help with cleaning the church and the other health and safety measures and so on. So every church will be responding in a different way. But can you just give us a bit of a sense of how you're responding and what you think the particular challenges are going to be in this new phase that we're now entering?
Yeah, I mean, this is very much my personal view at the moment. I mean, I've got 8 churches in country areas, so I'm not looking at big setups here. I'm very keen to open for funerals again, where they're graveside funerals. I think if people are going from church to crematorium at the moment, I would still say go to the crem for all of it, because the music will be better and you can be filmed well. The service can be filmed well. If you're in church, you're not going to be singing. The music won't be up to much because singing and organists are not on the agenda at the moment. So I think for crematoria funerals, I would still say, I think you'll get a better job at the crematorium. Come back later to church if that's what you want. I happen to believe God is as present in the crematorium chapel as he is in one of my churches. When it comes to gravesides, I've got a different view. If I'm in one of my churchyards and I'm a few hundred yards from a church that I could use, and the weather ain't great and all that sort of thing, I would want to be able to offer them the church. Now, I know that many colleagues would probably disagree with me on this. I'm happy to be on my own at that because I have funeral directors on hand. I'm happy, if needs be, to sanitize it before and after. But my condition would be that we have the same numbers as the crematorium is allowing, so that people understand that it's the same sort of figure wherever you go. And I imagine this will be changing week on week in terms of what's allowed and what's not allowed. But that would be my heart's desire. But to say, if you've got 10 at the crem, you can have 10 in church. And the funeral directors I know will help me. But to be standing at a graveside, a couple of hundred yards from your church building, and it's tipping it down, or you've got people who can't stand very long, just feels not very hospitable. So I'm willing to put myself out, but I think others might disagree. So, and I'm even willing to turn the CD player on myself.
People will have different views, won't they, on the right approach? But that's really helpful to hear something of your approach and the way you wrestled with the different questions that are involved in all of this, realizing that they're really hard decisions for clergy to have to make, for funeral directors, and indeed for the families themselves. And just leading on from that, I suppose, obviously underlying all of this is, at the heart of it, if you like, is the question of families who are grieving and need a way to express that grief. I wonder if you want to just share some reflections on what you think this whole experience is doing for families who are experiencing bereavement, and whether you think there are particular things that the church is going to need to do in the future to address these wider questions of grief.
Yeah, I mean, I sense now that people are listening to our words more than perhaps they did. And I suppose I would like us to have a more definite view on, this sounds awful, on death and what it's all about. I think we've been a bit quiet as the church on the Christian hope that we have to offer. So partly that, but in reality, in terms of the church, we're saying, yes, we would love to do you a memorial service later when you can have everybody there or whatever. And we do memorial services anyway at All Souls. But I'm mindful that that's going to be a long way off before we can offer that. So my guess is some people won't take that up because too much water will have passed under the bridge between the funeral and being able to offer a decent sized memorial service, if I could put it like that. So my view is to do the same as I'd always try to do, which is to listen well and allow people to say what it's like, to express their anger, their grief, their confusion, whatever. I don't think that changes, except I can't be there alongside and hold their hand or whatever. So that's harder to do at the moment, but there may come a time when we can do that. I think listen well would still be, and not dole out too much advice or platitude. I might even suggest that would they like to write a letter to the person who's died that they didn't get a chance to say before they died, that sort of thing. But just to try and walk with them. And strangely, up until now, that time has given me more. This time has given me more time to walk with them than I might usually have. The other belief I hold is that people are a lot more resilient than we give them credit for. People amaze me of how they do come through things that are awful. And I would just hope I can be a companion along the way. I think it's having the courage to say to their why questions, I don't know any more than you why it's like this. I think that's the sort of thing. And then just a gentle offering of Christian hope if I've earned the right to give it.
Thank you, Vivienne. I love that mix. Yes, the emphasis on listening, on the practical care for people, and then yes, finding the right way to share Christian hope in the midst of all of this. And that's something we all need, whatever our circumstances at the moment. That theme of hope does seem to be emerging in all sorts of ways from this, and the need for us to be able to support one another as we find that hope in the Christian faith in particular. So my thanks to you, Vivien, for all that you're doing at the moment and for your willingness to share as part of this message. My thanks to others watching this message for all that you're doing in sharing that practical care for one another and sharing Christian hope with one another as well. My prayers continue for all those around the diocese, and my thanks for your ministry.